last night was the deadline to submit photo inspirations for February's color of the month, and I went through them early this morning. I got so many great ones. It was so hard to narrow it down. A lot of them I actually put into a different folder that might become colorway inspirations on their own. We'll see, but I had one photo that was submitted that came with a little bit about what the submitter found so inspiring about the picture, and it just really spoke to me. And immediately once I read the little inspiration summary, I immediately had ideas for what to dye up, and I just couldn't get that out of my head. I really enjoy reading the little bits that people send me about what they find inspiring in the photo, because often it's things that I am not originally drawn to. So it really pushes me to look at the pictures in a different way from another person's perspective. But with this photo, it really spoke to me right away. And so now comes the fun part. I'm getting ready to dye up the first batch. I've got some ideas in my brain of some different dye techniques to use to achieve the effect I have in mind. So I'm really excited to see how these ideas translate into the physical yarn. Pretty excited about February's colorway. Yesterday, I posted a couple questions on Instagram to try to get some feedback on ways that I can make the online shopping experience better for my customers. And of course, that led to me getting lots of requests for swatches of my colorways. This is probably one of the things I'm asked for the most, and has been since I started dyeing, is swatches. I've avoided it for a couple reasons. One, I don't feel like a swatch is really the best representation of how a colorway is going to knit up, because how a colorway works up is going to depend a lot on your gauge, what size needles you're using, what kind of project you're working it in. Like, is it a small circumference sock? Is it a larger shawl or a sweater? Are you working in the round? Are you working it flat? Goes on and on. So there are a lot of different factors, and a little 4-inch square is not going to show you that, and it's not going to be the universal truth of how a colorway may work up in every scenario. So I usually try to direct people who ask me for that to videos or tutorials on learning how to read a skein of yarn, because that overall is going to be a more valuable skill and will enable you to better understand how a type of dyeing technique or how a skein is going to knit up in multitude of projects, but I still get asked for swatches all the time, so I'm giving in. And I've heard from other dyers that it actually really does improve sales. And so if it helps the customer, then okay. I'm gonna do my best. So I have a big old bin of yarn that are leftover bits from projects that I've worked on or skeins that I pulled to be knit with, but I haven't worked with them yet, but I already caked them up, so I can't list them in the shop. So I'm gonna go through that and pull all the different colorways that I've been hoarding for myself so that I can start working on some swatches from those. And I'm probably gonna need some help. I'll probably at some point put out a call for volunteers to have me send them a skein of yarn and they can knit up a swatch and then keep whatever is left over. So if that seems like it's up your alley, be on the lookout for that. But yeah, I mean, another reason I haven't done it is it's time consuming since I'm just one person here. And also it really is a big investment in my money, in my inventory, for me to have to pull a whole skein every time there's a new colorway. So I think it'll be for the best though. I just need to get over myself.
In the cardigan to switch true words. Poor unfortunate souls, in vain, indeed. This one longing to be thinner, that one wants to get the girl, and do I help her? Yes, indeed. Those poor unfortunate souls.
Andy and I ran away to Disneyland today. One of my favorite places in the park to escape crowds is the Carthay Circle restaurant in California Adventure. It's like a 1930s style lounge and restaurant. And they make some delicious drinks and some delicious food. Highly recommend it. I'm enjoying the double pear martini today. It's my favorite drink on the menu. couple of days I've been fighting some crud, cold or something, so not too much has gotten done besides a lot of naps. This morning I walked down to the post office, so I'm going home from there. Hopefully can get myself in gear and get some work done today. I've got to get prepped for the release of February's Color of the Month, and I've got to prep for a trunk show that's coming up on February 9th, and a shop update. So I've got a couple lists to make, because you know me, everything's got to be in lists. And so hopefully I can get into the dye pans today and get some pretty yarn stuff. So this week I did get a couple packages of squishy mail to share, and I haven't had a chance to sit down and chat about them yet. So I did show off the unpackaging of my Plank & Stella Bob's Burgers Mystery Sock Club that arrived at the beginning of this week. This installment was inspired by Linda, who is my favorite character on the show. So when that was announced as the inspiration for this installment, I had to jump on it. So love Linda's yarn. I mean, it's perfect. The colorway is called All Right, and it's on the Akame sock base, which is a 75-25 merino nylon blend. And I think besides this beautiful yarn, my favorite thing that came in the package, which was full of lots of beauteous little odes to Linda, but my favorite is this little charm, the raccoon stitch marker that came in the package. Is so cute. I really want this to focus on it. If you are a fan of Bob's Burgers, then you will get the joke of the raccoon charm, but Linda is obsessed with the raccoons that rummage around the garbage behind the burger shop / apartment where they live, and she gives them the most ridiculous nicknames, and so this one of course has to be Little King Trashmouth, the one who started it all. And when I saw that there was a little raccoon charm included in the package, it really just warmed my heart. It's just hilarious. I love it. I also got a skein from Teeny Button Studios, who had a shop update, I think last week. And this just came in the mail a couple days ago. The colorway is called Flower Crown, and it is on the soft sock base, which again is a 75-25 merino nylon blend. And I just couldn't pass up these pretty pastels. They're the perfect spring colors. I think they're gonna make some gorgeous socks. And I think both of these are my first skeins from these dyers. I've admired their work for a while now on Instagram, so I'm excited to be able to add these to my indie dyer stash. Though I have to say that I have been on a bit of a crazy shopping spree so far this year. I mentioned that one of my resolutions was to knit more with the indie dyer yarn that I have been hoarding in my stash. And so far this year, I think I have bought way more to add to that than I have actually worked with. So I'm gonna have to police myself a little bit and get some knitting done before I add more to the stash. But it's really hard. It's really hard. It's so pretty. I can't help it. This week's knitting roundup, I do have one finished object to share, and that is my Elton cardigan. If you remember last week, I really did not have very much to do on this guide to finish it up. Just had the top ribbing on the neckline and to lengthen one of the sleeves that I had messed up. and that was it. Then it was done. So this lady got a blocking and all her ends are woven in. I just haven't sewn on the buttons, and that's because I hadn't bought the buttons yet. They just came in the mail yesterday, I think. So I bought some buttons off of Etsy. Was having a really hard time actually finding buttons in a color that I wanted, and I'm not really sure about these. From far away they look pretty good, but up close they're a little bit too brownish red. I really wanted a deep berry like the yarn I used. So I may do a little bit more button shopping, may get off my lazy butt and actually find a button shop in town so that I can pick out an appropriate color without guessing on the internet. But we'll see. I really enjoyed this knit. I highly recommend it for people who are looking for a relatively straightforward cardigan or sweater knit. And I also highly recommend it for people who have been wanting to jump onto the mohair bandwagon but haven't really found the right project or are a little scared to approach mohair because it is so fuzzy and thin. So I highly recommend this because it doesn't use a ton of mohair, so it's not a major financial investment to try it out. I used less than a full skein for this whole cardigan of a 50-gram skein of mohair, and also it is a really straightforward, well-written pattern. I think this is my first full pattern from Joji that I have finished. I've got a few more on my queue, including my granito that I will share later. So I found the pattern very easy to follow, very straightforward and well written. There was nothing about it that I needed to alter or change to make it fit better or anything that I found confusing in the pattern. The only thing I will mention about it is that Joji recommends using a tubular bind off for all of the bind off edges on the ribbing. And this is the first time I had ever done a tubular bind off. I have done a tubular cast on one other time, and I will say that for the tubular bind off, you need to be very comfortable with your Kitchener stitch because it requires a lot of Kitchener stitch. And I mean, practice makes perfect. I actually messed up my Kitchener stitch along the bottom hem, which is the first hem that you come to for doing the tubular bind off, and also happens to be the most stitches that you have to do for the tubular bind off. And I kind of got somewhere along the way, my stitches got out of a line, and one of the edges looks a little wiggity whack. But I mean, as I went along, I got much better at doing the Kitchener stitch for all the edges. And it does leave a very, very pretty edge along all the ribbing because it has this look that kind of looks like the hem is folding over and flowing onto the other side instead of just having a flat edge like a traditional bind off or cast off would. So it is a very pretty polished edge for a 1x1 ribbing. That being said, I'm not sure I will ever do it again because there is just a point where the details, nobody is ever going to notice it. I mean, nobody that I wear this cardigan around is ever going to notice the edging on the ribbing. I mean, I probably wouldn't even most of the time. So it is a time investment to do the tubular bind off, and I'm not sure for me that the finished product is worth that time, but I am definitely glad that I have it as a skill in my repertoire now, and that I've done it and I know how to do it, and I can fall back on it if I ever become less of a impatient knitter. So Elton is finished, and I'm happy to cross that off my list. I have been wearing it even without the buttons. I have been throwing on this cardigan in the mornings when it's cooler. It is so lightweight with the mohair, and also super warm. It's like the best of both worlds. So happy to have that finished, and I think this is my first, is this my first garment of 2019 finished? Pretty close, I think. One of my other knitting goals from last week, besides finishing my Elton cardigan, was to get the body of my granito sweater finished, and I did. So you can see she's all done, and I have started working on the first sleeve. Just started that last night. So I decided to do the sleeves before doing the pocket backing because, as you know, I do not like working on sleeves too terribly much, and so I figured I'll get those out of the way, and then the little finishing touches like the collar, ribbing, and the pocket backings will be something that will push me towards finishing up this knit. So I am using Long Dog Yarn Single in the Topaz colorway, and the body I knit alternating 2 skeins at a time. The sleeves I'm going to try to get away with only doing 1 skein, but if I run into any pooling issues, I'm going to have to tink back and start alternating skeins on those as well. But I've said it several times, I'm really happy with how this is turning out. I tried on the body yesterday, and I'm really happy with the length of it. So hopefully once it's blocked, it'll be even better. Really happy with how this is knitting up. And now that I have 1 sweater off my needles, I might find myself tempted to cast on a new one. We'll see. But by next week, I would really like to be pretty darn close to finishing up this sleeve at least. So that is my goal for next week, is to be close to / finished with the first sleeve on granito. I've also been working on my socks this week. I've primarily been knitting on my Leading Men Fiber Arts socks, and I measured these guys last night, and I am about ½ an inch away from doing the toe decreases. This little abominable snowman marker shows the progress I've made since last week. And so these should most definitely be finished by next week's vlog. So if you had in your bedding pool, if you had the Leading Men Fiber Arts socks as being finished before my Knox Yarn Company socks, you win. Maybe. I mean, we're not finished yet. Could be a dark horse and come out of nowhere. I also couldn't resist myself, and I did cast on a new pair of socks in anticipation of being finished with one of the pairs that are currently on my needles. I went ahead and was just aching to cast on some of that Valkyrie Fibers Tolkien inspired self-striping yarn, so I just couldn't control myself. There was just one night when I really wanted to knit some self-striping yarn. So I love when it comes in those gumballs that I showed off. I feel like those must take so much time to wind up, and they just look really pretty, but it don't work for me to do my socks 2 at a time. So unfortunately I undid the beautiful gumball and caked it up into 2 little cakes. And I just barely got started. I'm not even done with the ribbing on these yet. This is the AON colorway and will be my submission in Lauren's knit along this year, which is called the Unexpected Journey knit along, which is open to anyone who wants to work with some Tolkien inspired yarn or a Tolkien inspired pattern or anything Tolkien inspired. You're welcome to join in, and I recommend you check out the Valkyrie Fibers Instagram page for more information on the knit along that she is hosting this year. So those just barely got started, and I think that's all the knitting I've done this week. So my goals for next week are the sleeve on Granito and to finish my Leading Men Fiber Art socks, and then we'll see where the rest of my knitting takes me.